All right, hi again. Welcome to our report on our 6-month progress report on our institutional action plan. And for those of you who don't know, for some background here, we're at the beginning of last summer, in the wake of the death of George Floyd, there were a number of calls throughout the world for racial justice, and they came from a lot of institutions. But Regis uniquely put forth this institutional action plan. It stems from President Hayes's letter, A Commitment to Do Better, in which she outlined bullet points, some steps that Regis would commit to take as an institution. Those bullet points became this institutional action plan. We promised the community, as part of our accountability, that we do report on our progress after 6 months and 12 months. Our 6-month date was February 2nd. And since then, for the past month, we've been going around and talking to various community members about our action plan and the progress we made thus far, as well as collecting some feedback from our community about this plan. And that's really important to us, not only for accountability, but also to make sure that we're heading in a direction that we as a Regis community want to head in, that we spend the next 6 months working on the tasks and goals we set for ourselves that are still relevant to our community today. And so in this progress report, you'll see not only the steps we've taken in the past 6 months, but also some of the feedback that we've received from our community. And you'll see those in little quotes here too. And so I tried to incorporate all that feedback, the good, bad, or indifferent here today. We are still collecting feedback. And so I'll send you a link where you could submit feedback moving forward. Because again, the action plan is only as good as whatever we think is best for our community. So of the action plan, there are 9 goals. Each goal has a leader, and each leader decided on the tasks that would need to be done to accomplish that goal. So as I go through these, you'll see not only the work that we've accomplished as a community, but our industrious goal leaders really took charge of these ships and have made it happen. So an overview of our significant achievements. In the past 6 months, we've done a lot of work on this action plan. So we brought together dozens of volunteers from across the community to accomplish our goals. Again, each goal leader has a leader, but they also have a team of volunteers, faculty, staff, and students who are committed to ensuring that these goals are accomplished in the 6 to 12 months we set out for ourselves. We've also did an in-depth racial healing training with the Administrative Council and the Student Affairs Leadership Team. And that has been one of the starting points we did at the beginning of the fall semester. And it has really set the tone for our work moving forward. We also, with our alumni community, published an article called Do Better in Regis Today, which documented all of our accomplishments, including the feedback we received from our community forums we had at the beginning of summer with students, faculty, and staff, and alumni. We launched an institutional-wide self-identification campaign. A lot of the work that we are doing on this action plan requires accurate and up-to-date demographic information. So it's very important to us that we have accurate and up-to-date demographic information. And in order to do so, we wanted students, faculty, and staff to be able to self-identify, as in tell us how they identify. And ITS and HR were wonderful in allowing us to open up fields where students, faculty, and staff can go in and self-ID. And that comes with it expanded ethnic categories and gender identity categories. I will say, when we brought this to the Student Government Association, the self-identification was one of the things that they were most excited about, in particular, the expanded gender identity categories. So that received a lot of positive feedback. In addition, we had Founders Day. Goal 9 was to re-envision Founders Day. And last September, under the leadership of Dr. Jackson, we had a very successful community-wide event that brought together over 700 people in a day-long dialogue on racism, equity, and social justice. And the feedback from that day was overwhelmingly positive, and people really wanted more dialogues and more community conversations about racism, equity, and social justice. And finally, again, regular community feedback is essential. So we are continuing to gather community feedback and ensure that we are moving in a direction that works for everybody. So going through some of our goals, the first goal, goal 1, is under my sort of ship, leading this through expanded learning and professional development opportunities. So in the past 6 months, we've worked with our student leaders to design the Racial Healing and Equity series. We also, in partnership with HR, launched a required online webinar for all faculty or staff. I don't have our updated numbers now, but we're really close to 100% completion. And even our Board of Trustees has been invited to take that online webinar. And this is just so we have a shared understanding of terminology and other information as we move forward into more in-depth conversations. We also started a Lunch and Learn conversation series, and we had our second Lunch and Learn this afternoon, and they will continue throughout the rest of the semester. And these are opportunities for our faculty and staff community to come together and to have conversations about things that are going on in our community, things that will help us better serve our students and better serve all of our students. Our next steps are to continue to work on expanded learning opportunities for students, and then work with HR and thinking through some faculty and staff retreats. The feedback we received from Founders Day, in addition to our Lunch and Learns, is that the opportunity to pause your work and come together to have these conversations is essential. And so working with HR and some of those opportunities over the summer. And then we'll continue to engage the trustees who just established a committee on inclusive excellence. So we're looking at inclusive excellence at all levels of the organization. Goal 2 is our hiring goal. So this was part of the feedback we received from our students, is the need to intentionally think about our hiring practices to ensure that our faculty and staff population look like our students. And so under the leadership of Dr. Driscoll, in partnership with AVP Sullivan from Human Resources and myself, this group has started by joining New England HERC, which is an organization that will help us implement best practices for hiring for diversity. We're also reviewing the relevant literature to make sure, as we're rolling out practices for hiring, that we're employing the best tools and the best resources we can to ensure that our hiring practices are equitable, and then have targeted measures and outcomes for hiring for diversity. The next steps are to look at our demographic data that we're collecting on our faculty and staff population to make sure we establish a benchmark for where we are, and that will help us establish where we want to go in terms of our demographic data. We're also looking to establish metrics to improve recruitment and retention of diverse faculty or staff. So that's helping us look through an assessment plan to help us look through and periodically review our practices, and then develop a hiring and retention plan. So one of the key feedback we got on this goal is that we can't just look at hiring, we also have to look at retention. And I know that Dr. Driscoll is very committed to looking at retention as well as our hiring practices. One of the other feedback we got is to think about how not just this goal, but all of our goals, how are we looking at this at the program level? So how can we make sure we're supporting and empowering people to accomplish their own diversity goals at the program level? And this is something that Dr. Driscoll is aware of, and all our goal leaders are aware of, that we're committed to making sure that people at every level have the tools they need to accomplish this work. The third goal is under our very own Dean Edney of the College of Arts and Sciences. And she's leading the review of the course and curriculum to ensure that they reflect the diversity of our student body. Dean Edney has done a lot of work with her group and her subcommittee. They have created a rubric for faculty and staff and a faculty survey to assess how faculty are employing diversity, equity, inclusion concepts in their curriculum and their courses, and help them think through their syllabi to ensure that they are as inclusive as possible. And we're also working on embedding DE&I standards at all levels, from the course and program proposal review to the assessment committee. The next steps here are, again, to review the faculty survey data that we're collecting over faculty, assessing how well they incorporate concepts with diversity, equity, inclusion in their classes, and what support they need. And so what's going to be illuminating for us in this survey is to help think through what support faculty may need in order to do better in this work, whether it's learning and professional development or additional resources, or even resources such as time. We're looking at the annual report language to incorporate diversity, equity, inclusion into the faculty annual report of service and the program annual report of service. And then we're revising those course and program proposals and working with the Joint CAP to ensure that we are asking faculty to articulate how they will think about diversity, equity, inclusion in their new courses and programs. Again, stop me if you have any questions or you have any comments or anything to add, because I know some people in this room are part of this work. So I'm only the expert and presenter insofar as what I know. And so a lot of people in this room might know more than I, so feel free to jump in. some of the feedback we got on this goal, and again, the students were really excited about this goal as well. So if I were to say which ones got the students most excited about the work they were doing, is the demographic information and looking at our review of course content and outcomes. And so a lot of this feedback, these quotes here, come from our students. So they said, you know, this is important. It spreads trust throughout our classes. They want mandatory DE&I classes. And one student mentioned that a mandatory course for all students on effective communication might really make a difference for how they approach their work, not only while they're with us at Regis, but also as they move out into the world. Another part of this feedback is to think about how we look at course content outcomes across programs and offerings. So making sure that the program plans and course offerings and thinking through some of the conflicts and help streamline this for students and how they register for courses. So they end up not having conflicts that cause them to extend their program longer than they otherwise would like. Goal 4, to increase student participation in institutional decision making. So again, along with this community feedback and gathering feedback from our community and getting feedback from the students on this plan, overall, under Dean Horner is working to look at our existing opportunities for student participation feedback, assessing the existence of the opportunities, but also the efficacy of those opportunities. So when the students are invited to participate in institutional decision making, how much are they involved in the process, and how well do they feel empowered to speak out in those roles? And so we're working on building an institutional culture where student involvement is integral to what we do. And I think that's what we do endeavor to do as a student-centered institution. We really want to make this part of what makes Regis stand out, is to make sure that student voice is essential as part of all of the decisions that we make. So the next step is to, Walt's working on finalizing the assessment of existing opportunities. We have a lot of existing opportunities there through the SGA and student representation in departments, but we are finalizing the whole list of opportunities as well as the efficacy, formalizing opportunities for student feedback, and also working on developing student leaders and thinking about how we can increase students of color in leadership positions. I know that this goal has been working with our grad and online population, incorporating grad and online student voice more intentionally in their decision-making process. And the grad and online students have been wonderful participating in the work of this committee too. So because we're meeting virtually, that the hope is that this work can continue. Goal 5 is to document and make public the experience of our Black students. This came out of the conversations from the community dialogue, as well as some of the social media feedback that we had throughout the summer as a result of George Floyd. And so here is working with our archivists to make sure that we're documenting the full history of Regis, to make sure that the history of Regis as we archive it is the history of everyone at Regis. One of the comments we got from feedback is to clarify why we're focusing on Black students and not all BIPOC students or Black, Indigenous people of color or other minoritized student voices. And for this purpose, we're centering Black voices because historically in our world they have been excluded. But the hope is that this process, as we establish it, and it's particularly the outreach we're doing and the interviews we're doing, can be replicated with other minoritized populations. I should also say that Justina, when she's putting out interviews and requests for oral histories, she's not excluding any voices from that process. So the intent here is to center Black voices at Regis, but we're working to collect stories and information from all students. The next steps there are to work with faculty, so outreach to faculty who already have an interview component in their curriculum, and then to conduct interviews and find a way to present those oral histories. The other feedback we got was we have so many tools at our disposal now through social media or interviews, or even one person mentioned the NPR model of StoryCorps, or thinking through maybe a podcast for different various ways to present this information. So it's not just your traditional, something that is collected in an archive and never looked at again, or only looked at for special projects, but how can we make stories more widely available to the community? Goal 6 is looking at our bias protocols. This came from also from the students in their demand letter. And so we're just working to make sure they're clear and consistent. So Bridget has done a fabulous job just looking through every place we talk about our bias response protocols and making sure that they're consistent throughout. Because the last thing we want is for someone to want to make a bias complaint or incident report and not know how to do so, or have the process be unclear. And we don't want that to sway them away from making a complaint. And so the next steps is to get feedback on the protocols. We want to make sure everyone understands it. So there's a lot of training and information involved, and then publicize those changes. Goal 7 is working with our alumni community and diversifying the alumni community. Molly has also done a fabulous job working with our alumni council and working to establish the GOLD subcommittee, that's the graduates of the last decade. In addition, we've been holding this racial healing and equity series, which are bi-monthly conversations with our alumni community. This has really drawn in a new group of alums, and so we have a wonderful participation. We have wonderful conversations bi-monthly, and they'll be continuing throughout the rest of the year, and it really helps bring people together. So next steps there are to continue with the equity series, but also recruit members for the GOLD subcommittee. We know our graduates of the last decade tend to be more diverse than those who came before. And so we're working towards that. And the ultimate goal is to establish alumni affinity groups. We need to make sure we have the interest and engagement from our graduates of the last decade to turn that into an alumni affinity group. 8 is to support and grow identity-based spaces for students, and this will really help bring a sense of belonging. And so we've been working on making a more welcoming physical space at the Center for Inclusive Excellence, but particularly in this online world, making a more robust online presence through our YouTube channel, as well as a virtual Thrive guide. The next steps here are to administer a student survey. We're working to assess students and see about their need for identity-based spaces on campus, as well as where they like to go on campus, as well as virtually, and how those spaces support them based on their identity, and then develop a plan for improving those spaces. In addition, we're working on community education and outreach. So we want to make sure the community is aware of why we need identity-based spaces. And that was actually one of the comments we got from the feedback, is that one person mentioned that, sometimes it seems like identity-based spaces are exclusionary, as in they're sort of counting some voices and not others. This goes to our community education, why identity-based spaces are needed. And I know Denise has done fabulous work on this education plan. And understanding that the identity-based spaces are not to create silos, but it's really to develop equity and access for all students. We know that students have different identities, and it's not best practices to treat every student the same, because every student has different needs. We treat students like individuals. So in spaces like predominantly white institutions, that to have an identity-based space is a space where students can come together to help gather a sense of self, create a sense of belonging, and really come to a place where they are comfortable in our institution. Particularly when the spaces outside those identity-based spaces are not traditionally designed for them. So this is not a permanent thing, but this is, as we're building equity, we need these identity-based spaces to contribute to a student's sense of belonging. And also we know that identity-based spaces lead to higher retention rates and higher academic success, particularly for students of color, particularly for Black students, as well as help them in their racial and gender identity development. And so, but that's all going to be part of the community education plan, and the results of the student survey are going to help us articulate that a bit better. And then Founders Day, again, we had a wonderful event, bringing people together with over 700 participants, as I mentioned in the beginning. And we, as a community, want more of these conversations. So the faculty and staff retreats will help with that, as well as this entire week of Heritage Week. These are really opportunities for us to come together and have these dialogues about racism, equity, and social justice. So moving forward, we're continuing with our progress. We will always collect feedback on our progress. And then we're working towards a strategic plan for inclusive excellence, which is another thing that was mentioned in the president's commitment to do better, is thinking about strategic planning as opposed to this action plan. I just want to share one more thing, one more wonderful comment email that I got from a student was that she was particularly impressed with this plan, the president's commitment to do better, all of the work of our goal leaders and our volunteers, because it is clear from the actions that we're taking and the work that's been done that Regis does not just talk the talk, but we walk the walk. So when we say we're going to get something done, we get it done, and we're going to continue to work on it. This is not a checkbox for us, but this is something that is a part of our mission. It's part of what we are called to do, as the theme of this week implies. And it's also something that we have as a community committed to do for the long term. This is the contact information for all our goal leaders. There's still time to get involved if you want to contact them. All of this information is going to be published in our final action plan, which will be on our website, on our institutional action plan website. And so you can feel free, if you feel called to get involved in any of these goals, to reach out to our goal leaders. If you have any feedback, please reach out to me. I'm happy to incorporate it. I'm happy to work with you and talk to you and get you involved as much as possible. So with that, I just want to open it up to the floor. I know many of you have seen something similar before, but I want to share with you some of the feedback thus far. So I'm going to stop sharing right now and stop recording. And invite anyone to share.